just kind of working through these ideas has helped sort of crystallize and remind me of why I'm doing this job. Yeah.
Welcome to the iArticulate YouTube channel. This is the 8-minute window. Join us each week in our exploration of leadership. While it takes time to master, the 8-minute window is an encouragement that it can take just a few minutes to learn a technique that might last you a lifetime. For all the reasons, we'd love it if you could like and subscribe. It really helps the algorithm. Today we have a special guest, Michael Smith. He's a seasoned tool builder and a software architect with a background in architectural engineering and a passion for astrophotography. Michael brings a unique perspective to leadership from his work at L3 Harris, and we found a huge amount of commonality between his experience and ours in education. Join us as we explore his insights on tackling complex challenges and driving innovation. We always start with the same question, which is, what does leading or leadership mean to you, and how do you practice it?
Gosh, that's an interesting question, John. I think there are lots of ways to lead, and the key in any kind of leadership role is to fit the style of leadership to the particular challenge at hand. For me, I'm going to describe the kind of leadership that I bring to my role in my professional life, which is primarily to be a leader of technical teams of engineers, scientists, specialists in matters of national security, and to get them to collaborate on big, hard problems. And in that environment, I think the best kind of leadership model is one in which you view leadership as a support role. So my role as a leader is to create an environment in which all of those really intelligent, passionate, dedicated people can thrive and can do their best possible work. So the components of that, if I'm to break it down into like concrete terms, is, first of all, you've got to create an environment that is safe. And by safe, I mean one in which people have permission to speak their minds freely, to make mistakes, to take risks. Because the big, hard problems don't get solved unless people have that kind of flexibility. The second is that I think the work itself has got to be challenging. You can't just plug people into rote roles where they feel like a cog in a machine. You got to put them in a role in which it leverages their existing skills, but it gives them a chance to grow. You got to throw down some kind of challenge that's right at the edge of what they think they're actually capable of doing. You got to get people out of their comfort zone, basically. I think the work has got to be meaningful. They've got to realize that they're not just punching a time card, that the consequences of what they're producing really matter in the real world. It's got to be a collaborative environment. I think no one is expected to be the genius who's got all the answers. I think these problems are way too hard for any one person, no matter how brilliant, to solve on their own. And I think the last piece that comes to mind is building a sense of connection. You really have to build personal relationships between community, between the members of the team, because there's going to come a time where things get really, really hard, and it's going to be tempting to say, I'm out. But having a personal commitment and relationship with the other team members is part of what pulls you through those hard, sticky spots.
This is really, really interesting. And I know there must be a lot of moving parts to your projects. How do you promote collaboration and communication among team members, especially when you're working on such complex collaborative projects and there could be people spread all over the place working on the same project?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And in fact, we do have geographically distributed teams. I'm in Colorado. Many of my team members are in the Washington, D.C. area, Rochester, New York, Melbourne, Florida, in some cases even overseas. So yeah, just managing the technology and the time zones is sort of fundamental to that. I think a lot of how we promote collaboration and communication. Part of it relies on the things we talked about a few minutes ago, that building of community. That's absolutely essential.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the foundation of community and connection is vulnerability. As a member of the team, I think you've got to be willing to see others and to let yourself be seen as well in a real and genuine way. And that means freely sharing your strengths, your weaknesses, your concerns, your beliefs, all of it. I think a key to collaboration, especially in an area like this where people have big brains and sometimes have egos to go with them, is non-attachment. To make a clear distinction between an idea that you may have hatched and offered to the group and you yourself as an individual contributor. Once the idea is offered to the group, it takes on a life of its own. You are not the idea. And whether that idea stands or falls should be on its own merit, not because it happened to come from an individual in the group who believes in it passionately.
That's so wise. It's amazing listening to all of these points you're making, Michael, from both of these first two questions, because I just finished a master's a couple of years ago. A lot of the themes and the different concepts that you're talking about are talked about by people that focus on educational leadership too.
Oh, okay.
And it's amazing to hear the way you're talking about it, very eloquently, I might add, but that really does resonate with a lot of what even I would say, John, there was a moment there where you were talking to Jonathan and I.
Yeah. Well, I think these principles, if they're true, they're likely to be universal. So it doesn't surprise me to hear that they show up in that sort of leadership training from a completely different discipline.
I was just going to say, human behavior is universal and messy.
Yeah, that's certainly true.
For sure.
I think another key piece of collaboration is a willingness to ask for help. And again, this goes back to that, how do you deal with big egos kind of thing? Because there's a common pattern of behavior amongst really smart technology people. They think they have to figure out everything on their own. And somehow it's a sign of weakness if you don't know the answer, or at least can bluff long enough to go find the answer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that, unfortunately, tends to hold back the whole team. You tend to slow things down if you're not willing to ask for help. So I encourage everybody on my team to ask. If you don't know the answer, that's okay. In fact, I'm going to look at you a little more skeptically if you don't ever ask for help, because I know you don't know everything.
Well, I haven't encountered any educators like that. Have you, John?
Oh, I can't imagine any educators. In fact, anyone that I've ever met in my entire life who would prefer you to think that they know all the answers at all.
That's great. Very insightful.
And I think the final point I would make here on managing large collaborative projects is trust the system. And this was a personal challenge for me. As you might imagine, these are massive programs involving hundreds, sometimes thousands of people with budgets that run to hundreds of millions or billions of dollars. Gigantic programs. And you necessarily have to have a lot of organization that on the surface looks like a cumbersome bureaucracy. And when I first got involved in these kind of programs, I came from the background of a fairly small company, and I viewed all of this formality as just unnecessary and slowing things down. And in some cases, that is the truth. There is an element of that. But for the most part, these systems are absolutely essential. And you have to set aside that romantic belief of the lone warrior out there making brilliant breakthroughs and realize that to solve these kind of problems, you've got to work together in a complex system that requires the support of formal processes and methods. So set that story aside, use your tools for what they're good at, and work with your teammates to get the job done.
That idea about a system is really interesting, because I think a lot of I guess it's the same in many industries, but in education, we often rail against the sort of formal systems that we have to fit into and things like that, which probably is a natural human reaction, but it does mean that you get consistency of practice. We want to move on to the next question. So, Michael, our third question. You've talked about having this globally spread out team, but imagine you could bring them all to one place in the world for a day. Where would you want to bring them and why?
Oh, that's an interesting question. And that's an easy one to answer. Setting aside, I'm going to answer this in a hypothetical way because I'm going to set aside the issue of safety, because I would want to take my team to places where our work matters, because that's the place where these geospatial intelligence questions, the answers to these questions matter the most. They make a real difference in people's lives and well-being. And for our teammates and our team members to see that with their own eyes, to see that the intelligence product that they are creating makes a difference in the outcome of these situations for real people on the ground, I think that would be incredibly powerful.
Michael, could you share one of your practices that an aspiring leader could try out next week?
I think a practice that every leader should try on is the practice of saying, I don't know. I think when I first found myself in leadership roles years ago, I had this naive idea that the leader was the person with all the answers. In fact, the leader was the person with so much experience and skill that you could plug them into any job that was part of the team, and they could do it as well or better than that teammate could do it. And then if you could just clone the leader and have an army of those people, you could get the job done in half the time. And of course, in hindsight, I realized that is an absurdly naive point of view, right? It is not the role of the leader to be the best at everything. It is not the role of the leader to have every answer. It's the role of the leader to create that environment we talked about back with that first question, in which the leader can say, hey, here's a thorny problem, and I don't know the answer, but I'll bet somebody on this team or some combination of people on this team do. So let's have a conversation. I want to invite someone here who has an idea to put it on the table, and let's work together to build it out. Together, we're going to figure out the answer. Together, we're going to know.
In your organization, is that you create this almost flat process to encourage efficiency and quality of outcome. But do you find a pressure still from the hierarchy to be the sort of head on the block, so to speak, if it doesn't go to plan, or it's your achievement if it does go to plan?
Yeah, that's a great question, John. I think this goes all the way back to that first question that we were describing, which is, how do you practice leadership? And in my case, I described for you an environment that I create. Part of that environment is putting a force field around my team and trying to shield them from interference from higher levels of management to the extent possible. And that ebbs and flows. Sometimes it depends on who I'm reporting to. It depends very much on what the fiscal and timeline pressures are on the particular project. But to the extent I can, I'm always trying to create that bubble around us. And the flip side is, I think once it comes time to accept the credit for a job well done, it's absolutely crucial that that gets shared. You have to be willing, I think, to share the spotlight with the entire team.
Well, thank you so much, Michael.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
In addition to his work with L3 Harris, Michael is an avid astronomer. His digital astrophotography fits hand in hand with his professional work, building sophisticated analytics to extract insight from geospatial data and imagery. Be sure to check out his astrophotography at veryoldphotons.com.
Thank you so much for joining us in the 8-minute window. Until next time, stay inspired, stay focused, and please get in touch to let us know how your leadership journey is developing. Until next time.